Oh, you didn't think we were going to be gone until September, did you? No way. We're back, and we are back in a big way. Welcome to the Early Edge NFL Draft Prop Show presented by BetMGM. Yeah, this is really a thing. It's really happening. Thank you for watching it. I'm Dave Richard. You know me from Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports. Around these parts, you call me Uncle Dave. And I hope you're ready to start thinking about how to bet the draft because there are so many opportunities, or should I say, opportunities to do exactly that. It's good to see you. And as I bring in my fellow cappers, I want to remind you guys, like this video, subscribe to SportsLine on YouTube so you don't miss a thing. We're going to be here every Friday right up until draft week. And then the night before the draft, we're locking in our best picks just for you. And when I say we, when I bring in the guys, the fellas, I haven't seen them. What was it, EC? 7 weeks we've been without each other. We're together now. EC is here. Propstarz is here. Man, I can't wait to pick your brains on this draft because it's very interesting, but it's not really that interesting at the top of the draft, at number 1 overall. Do either of you really have anything to say about the number 1 pick? EC, you tell me.
Yeah, well, first of all, Uncle Dave, great to be back on with you and Proppy. You know, it's rare that I can say that I'm by far the third smartest person, easy for me to say, on a stream of 3. But with you guys, I'm so far down the ladder, but seriously, it's an honor. As far as the Bears go, listen, there's probably not value at number 1. We know that the Bears traded Justin Fields, which I'm not sure I would have done. I understand why they did it. But, they're kind of unpredictable here. You don't know what Ryan Poles is thinking. Sure, Caleb Williams is talent-wise potentially a generational guy. But in terms of the other things that comes with him, the pink fingernails, the pink phone, the flamboyant, like at some point, do you say, as you're going through the draft process, maybe we want to stay away from a guy like this and go to somebody who's safer, like a Jaden Daniels or Drake May? I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I don't know if I see that as an issue in Chicago. I think they would appreciate him no matter what his favorite color happens to be. Alex, anything to add here?
That reminds me of another Bears quarterback, Jim McMahon, right? He had some flair for the dramatic, had his own unique personality as well. I think it's all a lock for Caleb Williams to be drafted first overall by the Bears, especially after we saw Justin Fields get traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. As far as any value concerned with the first overall pick, I would say that there is none at the current price tag. The only people really betting this are people looking to launder money potentially.
Okay. We're not trying to do that here, but that is whatever it is. So there's nothing to bet at the top of the draft. But when it comes to the number 2 pick, we've had quite a week of news regarding it. Let's start at the beginning of the week. NFL media reported that the most popular answer for what Washington will do at number 2 was J.J. McCarthy. Here's the clip. Clip's coming.
He is going to be so committed to taking care of himself that you don't have to worry about size or he doesn't weigh enough. Lamar's done a pretty good job with his size. I think Mahomes, I wouldn't consider him a giant because he's going to get the ball out to the playmakers and make plays for Washington.
Okay, that was the clip of Jaden Daniels' coach at LSU, Brian Kelly, talking about his prize quarterback going to Washington. He said that at the end. Forget about the J.J. McCarthy stuff, but we know it happened. And then that clip came out on Thursday, guys. So odds have changed dramatically when it comes to both McCarthy and Jaden Daniels at the number 2 pick. It was plus 2,500 for McCarthy earlier in the week. Now it's down to plus 400 on BetMGM as of Friday. Whereas Jaden Daniels was kind of a heavy favorite, minus 180. Then he went down to minus 130. And then after that clip from Brian Kelly, after he opened his yapper, he's up to minus 150. So here's the question, obviously. Who do you think goes number 2, and where would you put your money on? Proppy, you're up.
First and foremost, Dave, I'd like to say at this stage of the draft process, we're interpreting so much news or so much misinformation that you have to basically be able to decipher what's real, what's not. We don't have the combine. The combine's already occurred. We don't have the NFL owners meeting. So really what we see between now and the start of the draft is a lot of smoke screen. We see a lot of this cat and mouse game that evaluators, owners, the media are all engaging in as people are being deceptive on purpose. So really, I think this is kind of these next couple of weeks is just a lot of deciphering of misinformation. And so and then in turn, you're going to see some drastic fluctuations. Things are very fluid between now and the draft, and that will be reflected in the odds. It wouldn't surprise me a week from now if Jaden Daniels is plus 500 and let's say Drake May is minus 400. You can see that type of volatility just based on this news cycle. So I would caution bettors at this stage just to be very careful because things can change so quickly. That being said, I think the number 2 quarterback prospect is Drake May. I'm going to ultimately go with him as the number 2 overall selection. Just looking at his ability, I think he is frankly the better pocket passer between him and Jaden Daniels. I think he has a little more ability to improvise as well, more of a pure clean passer as well. I think Jaden McDaniels has potentially some more upside, but I just see a guy in Drake May who, frankly, to me, I think there's an argument between him and Caleb Williams. That argument's probably already been decided as far as the Bears personnel is concerned, but it wouldn't shock me if Drake May was first overall on a few teams' draft boards. That's merely speculation, but I do think the 2 prospects are that close when comparing them together. So I ultimately think this will be Drake May selected second overall. I think there's an outside chance it's not by Washington, another team potentially trading up here. Again, this is something that's going to, probably change a lot of opinions over the course of the next couple of weeks until the draft. But if I had to go with the number 2 quarterback, to me, it's Drake May, and I think it'll be Washington or another team selecting him there.
That sounds like a lean, not necessarily a pick that you want to lock in, but obviously the odds would be in your favor. How about it, EC? Is Brian Kelly blowing smoke, or does he know something that we didn't know until after he talked with the number 2 pick?
Well, either way, Dave, I'm not betting this market. I mean, Jaden Daniels at minus 150, I'll pass on that. And Drake May, there's just too much uncertainty. Now, I respect what Proppy said, and listen, I think that there's some value with Drake May at plus 150, don't get me wrong. But the other thing to factor in here is that the offensive coordinator for Washington is Cliff Kingsbury. Who did Cliff Kingsbury work with in Arizona and draft as his primary quarterback was Kyler Murray, another Heisman Trophy guy. Now, Jaden Daniels, 6 inches taller at least than Kyler Murray. And he's, Daniels vastly improved from when I saw him often at Arizona State out here. He got a lot better under Brian Kelly in the last 2 years. His deep ball passing was significantly improved over the last couple of years. Nice to see that. But I think Kingsbury is going to want to work with that mobile quarterback, and Daniels certainly has that over May. So I would lean Daniels, but I would absolutely not lock this in just in case my intuition is way off. And maybe Kingsbury says, yeah, I want to go in another direction. I don't need another Kyler Murray type.
I kind of like it. I think Jaden Daniels is the fit for Washington. I think he can run the offense that Cliff Kingsbury has been running. But more importantly, I think Kingsbury can adapt the strengths of what Jaden Daniels can do. I think there's a breadcrumb of evidence that the addition of Marcus Mariota to Washington and the fact that he's a mobile quarterback, a guy who's willing to run, that kind of leans more into the profile of Jaden Daniels than it does Drake May. Not taking anything away from May's athleticism. We saw May run a lot too. He had a ton of rushing touchdowns. It's to Proppy's point. And that's what makes him maybe the better value at this stage in the game. I'm not going to say that I would put down 15 to win 10 on Jaden Daniels today. But if we're a week out from the draft, maybe even a few days out from the draft, and nothing's really changed, that's when I might put some shekels on Jaden Daniels. I think he is the second best prospect. I think he's the first best prospect for fantasy purposes, but second best in this draft. And I think Washington will keep the pick and take Jaden Daniels. Of course, a million things can change there at number 2, and a million things can change at pick number 3. We're starting with the quarterbacks today, as well as the top of the draft. So the third overall pick currently belongs to the New England Patriots. And if Caleb Williams is off the board, and if Jaden Daniels is off the board, well, it would make sense that Drake May would be the pick. And that's who I would take. I think that just the situation in New England, and using the same type of breadcrumb as we're using in Washington, as the Patriots have done. They added Jacoby Brissett. That's a big quarterback. That's a strong arm quarterback. It's exactly the type of quarterback that Alex Van Pelt, the new offensive coordinator and play caller that the New England Patriots have, that's the type of guy that he's worked with and has had success with. And he himself is a former quarterback. It makes sense to me that Drake May would be the guy if the Patriots kept the pick. I also think there's a chance that other teams want Drake May. I think a lot of teams see what Proppy sees in Drake May, and they might make a move up to go and get him at number 3 overall. EC, is Drake May the pick for you at number 3? Because I know it can't be the pick for Alex because he's taking Drake May at number 2.
Yeah, I absolutely think Drake May goes number 3, but I don't think it's made by New England, Dave. And I don't know. The Drake May markets are off the board. I didn't see this, but I think Minnesota's going to trade up. They have 2 first-round picks. They have 11, 23, and I think they're going to use that plus next year's first to move up and get this pick. And I think that when you have a number 1 guy like Justin Jefferson, who you have to keep happy, who's in a contract year, you want to extend him long-term, you need to find him the quarterback that he wants. I'm sorry, but Sam Darnold isn't going to cut it. Like, Sam Darnold at this point in his career should not be starting in the NFL on a regular basis. Drake May is a guy, I mean, you've done a lot of the film study. Dave, you like him a lot. I think New England's in a full rebuild. I think you can get 2 first-round picks this year. Maybe they even get another second, third in addition to that. Plus, you would have 2 next year. I absolutely think that's worth it. So I don't think Drake May is a member of the Patriots, but I do think he goes number 3.
Now, let's be fair. If Drake May is as popular as we think he is, and Proppy, you mentioned this when you talked about Drake May going to 2, that means that maybe there's a trade up to 2 for someone to go and get Drake May. And so what do you think happens at number 3? Is it Jaden Daniels? Is it another quarterback? What's happening there in your world?
So it's very interesting, Dave. First and foremost, there were a couple things I wanted your both of opinion on, Dave, but you made an interesting comment to me regarding Jaden Daniels possessing the most upside of any of these quarterbacks from a fantasy perspective. I'm assuming what you mean is because of his rushing floor and his ability to offer, the dynamic, let's say, similar to Lamar Jackson ability to escape the pocket and accumulate a lot of rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, which, as we know, gives quarterbacks a very high floor. That is why you consider him the number 1 fantasy prospect, Dave?
Yeah, bingo. That's exactly why.
Okay, so yeah. Another question I have is 11 plus 23 enough to move up? I know EC mentioned an additional first-round pick. That seems like a king's ransom to move up to number 3 overall. Here's where I think we're all in lockstep. I think we all believe, and I think this is the consensus opinion as well, the top 3 players being drafted are going to obviously be Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May. We know Caleb Williams going first, and then it's just a question of where do May and Daniels fall, and does another team or multiple teams, potentially jump in to that number 2 and number 3 spot, the Vikings being a very likely candidate, considering they have Sam Darnold as their QB1 currently. The rest of the roster looks very good offensively. We know they're obviously in the market for a quarterback, and this is a very quarterback-heavy draft. So they even have some options if they decide not to move into the top 3 or top 5 and potentially. But yeah, I do think we're going to see potentially a team surprise us who we don't expect. Could it be the New York Giants? Could it be Sean Payton? We know really needs a quarterback. Do they have the draft power? Probably not. But I think there is potentially a dark horse here who could move into the top 3 spot. I think EC really made a fine point when he talked about New England. New England, looking at this roster, to me, they have maybe the least amount of talent in the NFL. They could really use multiple starters. They're not a quarterback away, obviously quarterback being the most important position in order to field a competitive roster, but they just need help all over the field. So if I'm New England, I am really, unless I've absolutely fallen in love with a quarterback prospect and I feel very strongly that this is a all-pro caliber player eventually, I am looking to acquire as many assets as possible and get multiple selections if possible. So yes, I believe Drake May is likely to go number 2. If he ends up going, or Jaden Daniels goes 2, I think it's Drake May will be the 3rd pick here. So because I have Drake May rated as the number 2 prospect, and I think he's most likely to be selected 2nd overall, I believe Jaden Daniels obviously will be taken 3rd overall. There will be a coach, or obviously multiple coaches and teams, absolutely in love with his upside, with his ability to make an impact as both a rusher and a quarterback. I know this is an easy comparison, but reminds me a lot of Lamar Jackson, both from the stature perspective, from the skill set. I do have some question marks regarding only, He was only really productive once he had an NFL caliber offensive lineman and, excellent wide receivers on the outside. But that being said, I think you can't ignore this incredible upside and his ability to make the impact as a rusher and a quarterback. So I do think it ultimately becomes Jaden Daniels as number 3 overall.
Agreed. And that is at plus money. EC, you've got something.
Yeah, I mean, Proppy mentioned earlier about compensation to move up for a quarterback. If I told you were getting the next Josh Allen or a franchise quarterback who you're going to have for 10 plus years, and I'm not comparing, Jaden Daniels or Drake May specifically to Josh Allen, but what is that worth? I mean, that's worth, you can have my first rounders for the next 5 years. If you tell me I'm going to have a quarterback for 10 that's going to play at an all-pro level, I don't care what the compensation is, I'm going to move up. But you better darn, if you're a GM, get it right.
I believe the story is that the Dolphins offered 5 first-round picks to the Bengals for Joe Burrow, and the Bengals turned them down. That's point number 1. Point number 2, EC, if you're a GM and you're offering 3 first-rounders, if you're the Vikings GM and you're offering 11, 23, and a first-rounder next year, man, A, you're overpaying for the number 3 pick. There's a draft trade chart that's out there. You're overpaying by almost 1,000 points. But B, if that's what you're willing to pay to go get up and get your guy, call up Washington. Hell, call up Chicago and see if they'll take that. That is indeed a king's ransom. And if I were the New England Patriots, I would absolutely take that offer. And I know that that's just 3 quarterbacks. We still haven't gotten into McCarthy, but that's coming up right after this. Now, remember, if you're betting, take a look at BetMGM. And if you're a new customer to BetMGM, you're going to want to hear this, because new BetMGM customers can sign up today and get up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Just place your first wager of at least $10, and you will receive up to $1,500 instantly if your bet loses. Use bonus code EDGE. That's EDGE, EDGE, and you'll get that bonus. We'll be right back after this to talk J.J. McCarthy.
The blackout mystery remains.
Welcome to March Madness. Oh! You just never know in the tournament who is going to shine.
Stream March Madness live on any device, anywhere, and be ready for anything.
All right. J.J. McCarthy might be the most polarizing quarterback prospect in this draft. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about him, and then I'll chime in. We're not going to talk about whether or not he's going 4th. This is more a conversation about what team will go and make J.J. McCarthy their own. Alex, is there something you see on the board or maybe even something off the board that makes sense for J.J. McCarthy?
Yeah, fascinating, as you mentioned, Dave. Certainly a polarizing prospect here. My personal viewpoint regarding J.J. McCarthy is I think there's a lot of evaluators that are maybe conflating his lack of experience for upside, when in reality, I think he has a long way to go as a prospect. I think there are some tools there, but we really just haven't seen a lot from J.J. McCarthy where I think he's deserving of being a top 10 or even really a top 15 selection. That being said, in the NFL, we know that we have coaches that potentially have very big egos and have done a tremendous job developing players, and they may think, like, I'm the guy to do this. Like, let's look at his physical tools. That's why a guy like, Drew Lock remained in the league for as long as he has, is because he possesses elite tools, and coaches believe that they can ultimately develop him. So yeah, I'm personally down on J.J. McCarthy. To me, I have him as the number 5 quarterback here. I know that's not a super contrarian take there. But yeah, if I'm going to go somewhere, I think the connection that I've seen a lot is a lot of Sean Payton to J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, we know Kevin O'Connell being interested there as well, and the Vikings. But yeah, I ultimately would probably go with the Broncos here as my best selection for J.J. McCarthy. I think the Sean Payton will potentially fall in love with some of his tools, and I think there's a potential connection there. But again, this is so fluid. This changes on a minute-by-minute basis. Not necessarily something I'm looking to lock in now.
Right. All right. So plus 550 for J.J. McCarthy. We've seen that if he does go to Denver. What do you see with J.J. McCarthy, EC?
All right, so I saw McCarthy in person play against TCU in the semifinal game a couple years ago. He threw for 343 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, ran for 52 yards. Watching him in person, I thought Michigan kept the reins on him. He's a talented player, don't get me wrong. Seems more of a game manager to me than a star. I saw Joe Burrow also in the Fiesta Bowl in person the other year. And Burrow, I mean, you can tell this guy, this was the year before he blew up. He had Chase and Justin Jefferson as receivers. And you're like, this guy's got the arm talent. I mean, he makes plays down the field. I don't know if I wasn't buying into McCarthy like that. With that said, the interesting thing that you just mentioned, Proppy, with the Broncos, in all of Sean Payton's tenure, and I read this, you know how many quarterbacks any of his teams have taken in the first round? 0. Now, he had Drew Brees for that many years, so you didn't really need to. And so that you got to throw that out. I mean, they had Tony Romo on the roster, the Cowboys, so I get that. I'm going with a couple of teams here for McCarthy. I think the Broncos are a great lean at plus 550. Here's another thought. Remember when, I think Arizona did this last year. They traded out of 3, and then they traded down, then they traded back up into the top 10 to get an offensive lineman, Paris Johnson. I think it was 6 or 7, something like that. I could see the Patriots trading down, getting all that compensation from Minnesota, and then trading back and getting in, without giving up. You gained a first rounder next year. If you traded the 12th pick and a second to move up and get McCarthy in the, if he slips beyond 5, I mean, I could see where it makes sense. At plus 750, I think there's some value there.
And so that would give actually 2 paths to McCarthy landing on the Patriots. One, if they just stay at 3, they could do that. And 2, just like you said, EC, they do the trade down. They give up a lot of what they get in that trade to move back up. And I think that that's something that's worth considering, not only with them, but if Washington got that call that we talked about in the first segment and they move down, they could do the exact same thing. A lot of fluidity with those picks, although we don't really see early first round picks getting traded. I wonder if there's an exception this year. And with that being said, I wonder if there's a way here for McCarthy to not even last to Denver's pick, meaning Denver would have to trade up to go and get him. I think this is the guy Minnesota's wanted all along. Yes, we can talk about him as a game manager. I think that's his floor. I think he's ready to be an NFL game manager right now. The offense that he's been running in Michigan is very pro style. I think he can handle it. I think he's got good enough size. I think his arm is just barely good enough, but I think he's got upside to get better there. And so when I see JJ McCarthy and I think about him being in a good environment, look at the environment he was in Michigan. That offensive line was awesome. Roman Wilson was his top receiver. He's awesome. You're going to love him in fantasy next year. And now you put him on a team like the Vikings. They've got a good offensive line. They've got amazing wide receivers. I think he could be a plug-and-play starter for the Minnesota Vikings. And I think this is why Minnesota traded for that extra first-round pick. I don't know if they've got an intention to move all the way up to 2 or to 3. I think they want McCarthy. I know the odds stink. It's minus 110. But I think that's where I would go with it for JJ McCarthy. If we get to that point a week or 2 from now, he's sitting there at 110. I think I might put a sprinkle on that. Might put a sprinkle on the Giants too, but I'm not nearly as excited about that one. I'm not sure the Giants are actually going to take a quarterback in the first round or at all in this draft. Let's move on to another interesting quarterback, and it's Washington's Michael Penix. And I've got friends that love Michael Penix. They watch him play in all the bowl games. They think he's ready to be an NFL starter too. EC, I want to begin with you because I know you've seen this guy live as well. Where do you think is the best fit for Penix? Where would you put your money on Michael Penix in the draft?
All right, so I like Penix. I saw him this year. It was at my alma mater, the University of Arizona. There's the only home loss that Arizona had. Was against Washington, obviously, who went undefeated until the national championship game against J.J. McCarthy and Michigan. So I like Penix a lot. But did you know, just out there, I mean, you guys know this, but his offensive coordinator at Washington, Ryan Grubb, went to Alabama, and then he got a nice offer from the Seahawks, and he went up to, stay in Seattle where he already had his home. So you know what? Nobody knows Michael Penix Jr. in the NFL better than Ryan Grubb. At plus 600, Seattle's quarterback room right now is Geno Smith and Sam Howell. And I'm sorry, that's not going to cut it long term. Now, Penix, I'm not saying he's a surefire thing, but the guy just ran a 4.48 or 4.5 yesterday in his workout. I mean, that's pretty legit for a guy that we didn't think was that mobile. The arm talent is there. The injuries don't seem to be a factor. I'm going to lock this as an official play, Dave, at plus 600 odds. I think this is pretty solid. So let's lock that in with the Ryan Grubb Penix connection in Seattle.
6-1 for the Seahawks. I can tell you one reason why I was a little bit hesitant to agree with you on this one. I think the Seahawks, they've already committed to Geno Smith financially, and then they spent draft capital to get Sam Howell. to throw more on top of that, even if it's not with their first round pick. And we've seen Seattle trade back, trade out of round 1, get a bunch of capital on day 2. They could easily put together a package to move up and get Penix. I don't know if they're ready to do that. I don't know if that's part of their plan. And I don't know if they're the only team that would do that for Michael Penix, because Proppy, you've got a different team, and it's one we've already talked about for Michael Penix in the draft. What is it?
I do indeed, Dave. I'd first say, as far as Penix as a prospect, I think there's more questions regarding Penix than any other quarterback if we're looking at the top 6 here, which I think there is a consensus top 6, being Penix, obviously J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, and then the top 3 prospects we've already discussed. But looking at Penix, even though you mentioned the 4.5 speed, his ability to create outside the pocket just hasn't really happened yet. And being the oldest quarterback prospect, as far as these guys are concerned, with the injury history, I think, again, there's just a lot of issues looking at Michael Penix. Wouldn't surprise me if he's drafted outside of the first round, frankly, either. I could see him potentially slipping and then being an early second round pick, a team potentially trading up in that scenario. Looking at Seattle as a landing spot, obviously there's the connection you pointed out, EC, in addition to being the local kid. But I think Seattle's roster is ready to compete. They've also mentioned having used draft capital to acquire Sam Howell, who was a starter in his first year. Obviously, it wasn't, a great sample, but he performed. It showed some upside there. Geno Smith, who they've obviously invested in as well. So Penix to me doesn't really make a lot of sense if you look at Seattle's roster construct and just their ability. I think they still are a pretty talented roster. So yeah, if I'm looking at Penix, I believe that Minnesota could potentially be in play as a team that could trade up to the top of the second round if he does fall. Someone like Kevin O'Connell, who I think has a tremendous ability to coach up a potential quarterback here. We saw glimpses of that last year after the Cousins injury. He could really, fall in love with some of Penix's ability to throw the ball down the field. And we know this is a vertical offense in Minnesota. So I look at Minnesota as a potential landing spot at plus 275 because of Kevin O'Connell and his ability. I think he'll be able to mold a quarterback and doesn't necessarily need to have, all of the tools as far as being, a consensus top pick. So I think there's a wide range of outcomes when we're looking at Minnesota and what they do at quarterback. So I think they're a good spot to potentially sprinkle on. And I think Penix has a very wide range of outcomes. I could see him being drafted potentially in the top 15, or I could see him falling out of the first round altogether.
I've been told that Penix is not going to be a first round pick. When I was at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, I talked to NFL scouts, and they seem to all agree that he was more of like a round 3 pick. Now, that was in January, and things change. And quarterback demand, you guys know this, there's nothing like it in the National Football League. I can't help but wonder, though, if Penix, if he's not going to be a first round pick, then he could be on the board for almost anybody. And so I went and I did a little bit of research on the teams that maybe don't need a quarterback so badly this year, but perhaps need one badly next year. And the one team that I went to and I found, and the odds are astronomical on this one. Think back to 2016. Dallas Cowboys had a 36-year-old quarterback named Tony Romo. They drafted Dak Prescott, who was an older prospect, with a 4th-round pick. And Dak Prescott was a pretty good quarterback in college. He needed a little bit of help at Mississippi State, but he ended up being just fine. And wow, did the Cowboys strike some serious gold with Dak. And we've already learned that a contract extension between the Cowboys and Prescott, not a locked-in thing. At plus 10,000, I can't rule out the Cowboys taking a quarterback, even if it's an older prospect who could be their starter as soon as 2025. And I think Penix kind of has that mold of being a mobile quarterback who can be accurate inside of 20 yards like Dak Prescott and still challenge downfield. We know that Penix wasn't the most accurate thrower downfield. That was Jaden Daniels last year. But I think Michael Penix can make plays and be in the NFL. I don't want to see him go to a team where he's going to be a backup forever, because he's already of age where it'll be etched on his tombstone that he's going to be a backup in the NFL. But I think Dallas at plus 10,000, I think that's an intriguing place to put at least a sprinkle when you think about Michael Penix. And I also like the combination. That's not the only team. I like the combination of Dallas with New Orleans. New Orleans has very high odds. That's a team that definitely treasures strong arm quarterbacks. I think New Orleans is in play with Derek Carr on the roster for at least one more season. And I think Denver's in play too, just because if they miss out on a quarterback that they truly love in round one, they're going to be able to get Penix in early round two and have good value. And they could use him as their starter to begin the year. So that type of combo platter, Dallas, Denver, New Orleans, and you kind of hope that Denver isn't the team that takes them. But if they do take them, you'll make a little bit of money on the deal. That's where I'm looking for Michael Penix. And I think he's fascinating. And I also think Bo Nix is fascinating for the exact same reasons. He's been in college football forever. We know that Bo Nix can definitely be an NFL starter as far as being a game manager goes. I think he's the game manager. And I think Bo Nix could be a starter for a team that's in need of a guy who could be maybe a stopgap option or maybe somebody who could be the future franchise quarterback for a team. I think this is where Denver goes. I think Bo Nix goes to the Denver Broncos, not with a first-round pick, obviously, but with a pick on day 2, and he ends up being their starting quarterback. And the odds stink here. It's plus 200. But he can be a West Coast quarterback who can distribute to the Broncos pass catchers, hand off to the running backs, and certainly use zone reads, and he can run with the ball himself. But I would also sprinkle on the Dallas Cowboys with Bo Nix because he's in the exact same boat as Michael Penix. Older prospect, teams looking to move on from Dak potentially. Either of these quarterbacks can do it, and they're both at 100-1 to land on the Dallas Cowboys. One man's opinion on Bo Nix. EC, your opinion on Bo Nix, please.
Yeah, all right. Well, I want to start with one thing, Dave, because you kind of got me thinking here. You're gonna throw in Dallas as your sleeper team. Call me crazy. You're probably going to roll his eyes at this suggestion. There's one left-handed quarterback in the NFL right now, and he plays for the Miami Dolphins. And he's about to ask for $50 million a year next year with a history of concussions and not winning in the playoffs. So if you're the Dolphins, at some point, if somebody offers you something, like let's say Minnesota came along and offered you pick 23 for Tua. Now, I'm not saying they're going to, and I'm not saying that they should. But yeah, you should probably make that deal. And then you're in the market for Michael Penix and Bo Nix, who you can get at least 50-1 on each one of those guys. I think Penix is 50-1. I'd have to double check Bo Nix in that Miami
80-1.
80-1. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I just think, for me, I'm not paying Tua $50 million a year. I understand what you're saying about Dak, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm not paying him $50 million a year either. Just saying that. With that said, I think there are three teams that I would take a look at with Bo Nix. The Raiders at 5-1. We haven't even talked about them. Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell are not going to get it done. You could probably get Nix at the top of the second round or trade back in the late first for not giving up a lot and getting him. I think great call with the Saints, Dave, as far as Derek Carr having one more season probably left. I think Nix used to play at Auburn down there in the South. I like Bo Nix. I've seen him twice. Saw him in his last game at the Fiesta Bowl, obviously against Liberty. So let's not talk about a strong defense. But I did see him against Arizona in person in 2022, and he was dynamic. I was not impressed at Auburn, but like Jaden Daniels, got a change of scenery and really benefited from it. And my last team that I'm going to throw in here for Bo Nix, all is a lean. How about the Los Angeles Rams? You know, how much longer does Matthew Stafford have here? At 25-1, I think there's value. If the Rams, maybe trade down to the late first round or trade out of the first round, similar to where Green Bay got Jordan Love the other year, could the Rams be thinking, okay, Stafford's got 1, maybe 2 more years left. We develop Nix behind him. Worth a thought.
I like it. The Rams signed Jimmy Garoppolo, so they don't necessarily need a quarterback for 2024.
But he's not your long-term guy. I mean,
no
Jimmy Garoppolo's not
about it. But if Bo Nix isn't your long-term guy either, then what are you drafting him for if you're LA? Just
I think he is. I think he can. I think he can be. I think Bo Nix can be I like Bo Nix now. And I know you've studied the film a lot more than I have. I like Bo Nix.
Okay, that's fair. He's been in college a long time. He's made some great plays. When he went to Oregon, his numbers really popped. So Bo Nix is absolutely somebody who could be starting in the NFL. Properoo, where could he be starting in your mind?
Yeah, as far as Bo Nix as a prospect, I'm in lockstep with you here, Dave. I think he is more of a game manager, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If I'm looking at his, potential QB comp, reminds me of Derek Carr, reminds me of Andy Dalton, of a guy that can give you consistent starter level play. That's very appealing to a lot of teams, especially if you have a talented roster, getting a quarterback on a rookie contract who has a high floor. And is more of a stable prospect without the potentially huge range of outcomes, that could be very attractive to various teams. But yeah, I think EC hit the nail on the head. I think the Raiders are a really good look at plus 500. I think with the team, the way this roster is being constructed, the other quarterbacks on the roster, looking at Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, Bo Nix profile somewhat similarly to them. I think the Raiders are trying to win in the trenches, really build a very strong defense there, which we're seeing under Antonio Pierce. So I think he's a potentially natural fit there. I also see Denver being a potential landing spot as well. Again, we know Sean Payton and this Broncos team desperately need a quarterback. It's unlikely that they possess the draft capital to land one of the top 3 quarterbacks. So it seems very likely it's going to be, in my opinion, either JJ McCarthy or Bo Nix if Denver ends up taking a quarterback in the first round. So yeah, I'd be looking at Denver and Las Vegas as the 2 most likely landing spots.
I want to give you guys a couple of notes that I found during the week, and you can tell me if this means something to you after the break. And in fact, we should probably get into a little bit more of like some general betting strategy. Maybe we should have done that earlier. We're going to do it after the break. But here are my notes on the teams that could use a quarterback besides the obvious. New England needs one. Brissett's on a 1-year deal. Chicago obviously needs one. Washington obviously needs one. Las Vegas can move on from O'Connell or Gardner Minshew by 2025. They could also keep one or both of them as backups. So that's an interesting spot for a rookie quarterback to land. Dak, we already talked about it. He's got a void year after 2024, might not re-sign with the Cowboys. Derek Carr is still going to be on the books for New Orleans in 2025. So I'm not sure that they would go and take a quarterback to replace Derek Carr, give Carr 2024, but they might be able to trade him after 2024 to a team that just needs a stopgap quarterback in 2025. We also know that teams can maneuver the salary cap really well, and New Orleans has been known to do that. The Giants can cut Daniel Jones after 2024, save a ton of cap space if they do it. And Geno, just circling back to Seattle and EC's official pick with Michael Penix, they could indeed move on from Geno Smith after the 2024 season. Interesting times in Seattle. All right, take a look at this, and when we come back, drafting strategy and some official picks when it comes to running backs.
The best couch potatoes come from Pluto TV country.
And these taters, they like all sorts of different things.
Survivor Channel, Ink Master Channel.
If it's got a spaceship in it, I'm probably watching it.
3 channels dedicated to CSI.
Whatever mood you're in, it's going to be easy watching.
Okay, I can't let this show pass without some more draft strategy discussion. And Proppy, I'm going to come to you first on this one. What kind of takeaways should we have and things that we should look forward to when it comes to betting NFL draft props?
Yeah, there's quite a few strategies involved that I would say are beneficial to potential bettors. First and foremost, I would tell you that the easiest way to get limited as a sports bettor is by betting both NFL, NBA draft props. I think that's one of the easier ways that sports books are able to identify advantage players. I know people personally who have made sizable bets having inside information, pertaining to a team potentially, liking a player, and afterwards being severely limited on that sports book. So I would say you want to be careful and just be aware of the fact that, betting these markets, specifically these draft markets heavily, will potentially get you limited. So yeah, that would be the first and foremost point I would make. Again, I would also say it's such a fluid process as well. I don't see really a ton of upside at this stage. If we're looking at pinpointing specific players to teams, I think so much of that, again, changes, especially if we're looking outside of the top 5 picks. We have a good idea of what's going to happen first overall, and then you could tell me, a complete wild team that no one expected moves up to number 2 to select, Bo Nix, and I wouldn't be terribly surprised. So there's just so much that's going to happen between now and the draft. Locking things in now at this stage, in my opinion, is more of a crapshoot than anything else. I don't think the teams even know really what they're going to do outside of those top couple of picks. So I would say to be very cautious, really wait. Also the ability to essentially decipher information. There's so much misinformation that is being purposely purported and put out into the media right now. Just having the ability to sort of read the tea leaves is also a very advantageous skill for betting right now. So ultimately, be careful. Take every information you hear with a grain of salt. And again, betting draft props is a one-way ticket to getting potentially limited on your sports book. So just being aware of that, I think, is important as well.
Well, I'll say this, Proppy, with my recent college basketball picks, I'm not getting limited at any point on sports books after the way my Wildcats did last night. That did me no good in real life, nor on the sports books. Don't bet with your heart, bet with your head. Okay, nonetheless, the one prop that I like, I know I should learn. The one prop that I like to make when it comes to the NBA and NFL drafts is the before what pick number? Is it like, will Bo Nix go before pick 16.5? Yes is plus 200, no is minus 300. If you can find a plus money value, and what I like to do is I like to compile mock drafts, and I like to look up, some from CBS Sports and maybe some other resources, and look for, guys with proven track records of doing mock drafts that I've heard of and have looked at throughout the year. And, Mel Kiper, you look at him, and if there is some value there, I'll take a stab at it. Now, I'm not going big, but, if I can make a little money that I can then take to bet on that night's baseball or tomorrow's baseball games, yeah, I'm good with that. I also enjoy, and I don't know how you feel about this, Proppy, when they have after the first round and they're like, which team will draft this player? Like, as you guys talked about in the last segment, Bo Nix and Michael Penix, if they drop out of the first round, you're going to have those markets. Which team is going to draft, these two guys. And those are going to be, I think there's going to be some serious value there, especially with the logic that you gave, Dave.
I love the over-under on when a player is going to get picked. And I especially love it for players at positions that are thin or considered thin by the NFL draft experts. This year, wide receiver is deep, offensive line is deep, but safety isn't deep. And I think cornerback is a little top heavy. So I wonder if teams kind of reach for those positions, those defensive secondary positions. And so those props are going to be ones that I'm looking for specifically on draft day. I also like the over-unders for the number of players in the position. That's what I was just talking about. And as far as odds go, during the NFL season, you'll almost never see me take a player prop at minus 130 or minus 140. But for the draft, I can feel okay with minus 150. Probably would not go higher than that. And I do like to combo long shots like I talked about with Michael Penix, with Bo Nix. Take 3 or 4 teams. They're all long shots. As long as any one of them hits, we're making money. I like those as well. And I also don't mind making official picks a month out from the draft like EC did today and like I'm going to do today as we now move into the running backs and who the first running back is going to get taken. And the reason why I like to lock in picks at this point is because I think that some of these values can fluctuate. We already saw quarterback fluctuation this week with JJ McCarthy. All it's going to take is one news story about Trey Brent. We've got Trey Brinson written on the screen. It's Trey Benson or Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks is healthy and ready to go. Man, his odds will change in a heartbeat. I want to try and lock into those right now. The running back that I like best to go first is Trey, don't call me Brinson Benson, who I think is the most ready NFL running back. I almost said quarterback. Who is this guy? Trey Benson to be the first running back off the board. I think he's ready to go. I think he's very talented. He's good in the run game. He's good in the pass game. And there are a couple of teams that need a rookie running back to lead off their offense and to spearhead their run game. I'm looking at you, Dallas. You're not going into the season with Rico Dowdle as your starting running back. I'm looking at you, Las Vegas. I know you've got Zamir White. I don't know if you've got anything else that really makes the needle move. I think Trey Benson is the best talent at the running back position at plus 250. I want to get that now. That's an official pick for me, Trey Benson, to be the first running back off the board at plus 250. EC, who's your favorite running back in this draft? And do you have an official pick?
I do, Dave. I'm going to roll with Jonathan Brooks from Texas, coming off a torn ACL. But we're getting at I saw it as plus 300, but actually on the odds, I think it might even be lower than that. So Brooks last year for Texas averaged 6.1 yards a carry, 10 touchdowns, 187 carries, 1,139 total yard or rushing yards. I mean, that is a dynamic chance to, once Rashawn Johnson and Bijan Robinson were gone, Brooks had his chance and he made up for it. I mean, these odds last night I saw plus 300, now down to plus 225. So the way I look at it, these are some teams that need to target a running back. We talked about the Cowboys. I think the Giants, they definitely need a starting running back at this point. The Cardinals, maybe they have Connor, but who's really behind him that's that great? The Raiders, who you mentioned. And what about the Chargers? What do we make of them? Gus Edwards, I know they have that, but is that really going to move the needle? I think Dallas, though, is the way to go. They have nobody. Rico Dowdle not going to cut it. Jonathan Brooks is already in Texas. He's just a few hours down the road from Dallas. So at these odds, yeah, I'm good with it. I will lock this in as an official play.
That's interesting. Jonathan Brooks, an official play from EC. Alex, do you lean a different way at running back or maybe the same way as one of us?
I am in agreement with EC here, Uncle Dave. It's rare that I find myself having a strong disagreement with you, Dave, but here we are. When I'm looking at Trey Benson, I don't see a guy that's potentially NFL ready. I see a guy that right now profiles more of a committee back. I think he needs to develop, and I think ultimately, just needs more patience, needs to on one hand, the lack of experience is good from a mileage standpoint, but really just doesn't have, in my opinion, enough tape, enough reps to where he's really comfortable as a runner, both in a potentially zone scheme as well as a man. So I just see some, if we're looking at the running backs, I see Jonathan Brooks as being more of a natural fit for a kind of more teams. He has the ideal speed, strength, size, good vision in both gap and zone run schemes, where I just don't see that with Benson. I see him more of a combo back or more of a, what Tony Pollard was to potentially Zeke Elliott. I did like that comp there, potentially going to Dallas. So if I'm looking at this, I just see Brooks kind of offering more of a well-rounded game, which translates to more teams, whereas Benson right now is a little less experienced, in my opinion, has a longer way to go as far as the vision is concerned and his ability to play in multiple schemes. So for that reason, I think Brooks is the right pick here as far as the first running back taken.
Interesting. And I think it's interesting that the three of us collectively have landed on the two running backs with the lowest odds. Jake, can you bring up the screen with the first running backs to be taken, those odds on the board? First of all, how about Jake beating the associate producer who built the original graphic over that, said, no, we're going to get this one right. It's not Trey Brinson. It's Trey Benson. And look at it. His name is spelled right. Excellent job by Jake producing as usual. I really wanted to say Braylon Allen as a pick to go first because he's a unique running back compared to everybody else in this class because he's big and strong. He's just bigger than the rest of the guys. Obviously not quite as fast. I wonder if a team like Michigan, I know this will sound sacrilegious because Jim Harbaugh, he's got Blake Corum right there on the board. But what if Jim Harbaugh goes with the even more physical Braylon Allen over Blake Corum? At plus 1,600, I can't say I love it. I can't even say that I would put a sprinkle on it. But I do think that Braylon Allen could be a good back. Maybe he'll be the second running back off the board. That's a name to keep in mind for the props after day one of the NFL draft. Guys, this was fun. What do you say we come back next week and we talk about the receivers? We didn't mention Marvin Harrison's name until 48 minutes into the show. We got to talk about him. We got to talk about Malik Neighbors. We've got to talk about Rome Odunze. We've got to talk about sleepers at wide receiver. You guys cool with that?
I'm more than cool with that. I think there's 3 wide receivers that could potentially go in the top 8. So certainly no lack of just immense talent at the top when profiling these wide receivers. Potentially a generational talent as well in Marvin Harrison Jr. in the mold of a Jamar Chase. A guy that comes around once every couple of years. So really looking forward to breaking down these positions and just getting closer and closer to the draft. I know we'll all have additional picks, and there's just so much to cover here, as this is such a fluid process, and so much will change between now and then. So I'm just looking forward to this process evolving with you guys and offering as much information as we can leading up to the draft.
EC, I want to hear your thoughts too. Be quick about it, and also give us your official plays from today's show.
All right. Well, first of all, it's funny, Dave. I know this is a betting show, but from a fantasy standpoint, I do a dynasty league with Proppy, and I was really excited because my running backs were weak. So I was saying, all right, let's hope this is a running back heavy draft. And what we just talked about is nobody that's going to go in the top 50 picks at least. I'm really frustrated. I think I had bad roster construction. Meanwhile, Proppy's got a stable of them. Okay, I'm bitter about that. But wide receivers are great, which I already have. So we'll talk about that next week. Looking forward to that. My official plays from this week, I have two of them. Michael Penix Jr. to Seattle at plus 600. Jonathan Brooks as the first running back chosen. I got him at plus 300. Can I lock that in, even though he's down to plus 225? Can I get that extra? I need all the juice I can get, Dave. Can I get that?
Take it. It's yours.
Okay, I'll take it. Thank you.
Would you take it at plus 200 though? Because people are going to.
You bet I would. Do you want to? We need to talk about at some point. Do we want a showdown for this? Do we want to all get in on a showdown closer to as the first running back? You just think about it.
That's another thing for us to look forward to. My official pick from today's show is Trey Benson as the first running back off the board at plus 250. I'd like to lock that in now before the hype and the steam around Trey Benson really blows up and maybe even turns him into a minus number. This was awesome. It was so great to see you guys again. It's so great to get the gang back together. So great, in fact, that we're going to do it again next Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube. And that's going to be great too. So we'll do it the Friday after that. And then the night before the NFL draft, when everybody's going to go and tuck themselves into bed and get ready for what is Christmas Day in the NFL. Every team gets a gift. We're going to give you the best gift of all, our favorite plays for the 2024 NFL draft. Can't wait for it. For EC and Proppy and Jake working behind the scenes, I'm Dave Richard. Thanks for coming out.